At 7:48 this morning, a moment marked the end of an era and the beginning of an irreversible turning point. Prince William, heir to the throne, broke the silence with a decisive move. The dynasty closed, all hope of reconciliation shattered. Why did William act so forcefully? Was it to protect his family or a declaration of the dynasty's survival? We will explore these history-changing decisions right here at Windsor. Comment 1 if you support 0 if you find it unappealing. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the upcoming power secrets. Let's begin. Instantly, the world held its breath. For the first time in decades, major broadcasters paused their programming to air what veteran experts described as unprecedented. No more vague diplomatic rhetoric, no more appeasement delays. This message was personal and utterly decisive from William. From London to Los Angeles, from bustling newsrooms to millions of individual screens, a new reality had been established. In the United States, where royal narratives are always viewed through a deeply ingrained cultural lens, this declaration was seen as a complete redefinition of the structure of the monarchy. This was no longer a dialogue, but an affirmation of the institution's future. What surprised observers most was the absence of phrases like "at this time" or "in the present circumstances." In the dictionary of the monarchy this morning, only the concept of permanence remained. For those who had witnessed the crises of the past, William's steadfastness offered a thought-provoking clarity. Throughout the years, William had chosen to step back, allowing the institution to speak through carefully crafted statements. But today he personally signed the final chapter of a long-running controversy. This act was not merely an official announcement. It was a declaration by a future monarch of unity and the protection of the institution's core values. What prompted a man known for his meticulous planning like William to take this extraordinary step? The answer lies not in a single event, but in the accumulation of subtle shifts throughout the autumn of 2024. When diplomacy is no longer sufficient to maintain balance, and when spiritual values are put to the test beyond their limits, decisiveness becomes the only tool to protect stability. This is not an impulsive reaction, but the result of a profound process of reflection on responsibility and legacy. The door has been locked, and the key has been handed over to history. It is the culmination of a silent observation process when the limits of tolerance have finally been reached. Throughout the latter part of the year, an unusual pattern began to emerge, making Catherine unable to remain silent any longer. Whenever a significant initiative is launched or a community mission is launched, opposing streams of information immediately emerge. These articles don't come from transparent sources, but are hidden behind vague concepts like insider voices or anonymous observers. However, the timing of their release paints a picture of calculated intervention rather than random news. In a private conversation, Catherine pointed out the existence of an invisible hand pulling the strings behind these upheavals. This was no longer a natural flow of media, but a strategic campaign to obscure her devoted efforts. Witnessing his wife's devotion being undermined by deliberate manipulation, a new resolve formed within William. Meanwhile, King Charles was also facing his own challenges. He realized that the monarchy's valuable resources were being disproportionately wasted dealing with misinformation from distant sources. Legal experts and security teams had to work continuously to assess the risks from inflammatory content in the digital space. Meanwhile, the monarch himself was prioritizing his recovery, which demanded tranquility rather than relentless pressure. He felt caught between family affection and the responsibility of protecting the stability of the institution. Hope for harmony was real, but systemic paralysis was unacceptable. The real turning point came from a secret national security meeting. Authorities identified an organized pattern of activity targeting Catherine. These information campaigns transcended the boundaries of ordinary criticism to become a real threat to the credibility of the monarchy in the digital age. William received the report in a highly secure setting. Each page revealed a harsh truth about the origins of these psychological attacks. A significant proportion of the negative activities were confirmed to be linked to extremist groups from the opposition, turning William's suspicions into an alarming reality. The challenge extended beyond national borders. Delicate but serious questions began to emerge from major international partners. Strategic allies in Washington and Ottawa began expressing concern about the stability of the monarchy. They needed assurance that the symbol of the monarchy was strong enough to continue its role as a reliable diplomatic partner. This news came as a major shock to William. Understanding that the future of the monarchy rested on trust and global consistency, he knew that silence was no longer an option. His statement was not an immediate reaction, but a necessary act of self-defense to protect the institution's legacy from the storm. The upheavals involving members of the monarchy abroad were no longer mere entertainment news. They had now become a factor undermining the nation's soft power on the international stage. Princess Anne, with her practical and insightful vision, delivered a crucial wake-up call to William. She asserted that no one can protect everyone. At a certain point, a leader must choose between a constantly destabilizing individual and an institution serving millions. As winter descended upon London, William found himself caught in a maze of undeniable evidence. Psychological attacks on his family, the declining health of the monarch, and diplomatic risks threatened the nation's standing. The time for hope had ended, giving way to an era of permanent divisions. The first fundamental decision came from Princess Anne during a private meeting at Windsor. In the quiet space of knowledge and history, she did not resort to conciliatory words. She stressed that this institution required formal written and legal boundaries, not vague promises or expectations. Anne argued that without absolute clarity, all future interactions would turn into endless negotiations. Every silence would be interpreted as weakness, and every action would be dissected to search for hidden intentions. Please leave a comment with the number. If you admire Princess Anne's practical vision and determination in defending the institution, please leave a comment with the number. If you think she's too rigid and lacks the necessary empathy of a family, don't forget to press like and subscribe to the channel. Support us now, and make sure you don't miss our next decoding videos about the calculated moves of the royal family. Your interaction is what motivates us to uncover the truths hidden behind the walls of history. The only way to break the vicious cycle was to establish a new reality, a relationship with clear and public boundaries. William deeply understood that proactive clarity was the only weapon to eradicate ambiguity. The second decision stemmed from a comprehensive risk assessment by the palace legal team. The results of this investigation were truly alarming. If the ambiguity continued, the monarchy would face dangerous constitutional and security vulnerabilities. Experts warned of legal risks from unofficial statements and conflicts of commercial interest, damaging the institution's reputation. The longer the ambiguity persists, the greater the vulnerability of the institution. William understood that maintaining hope for reconciliation in a lack of transparency was essentially a far riskier gamble than a definitive split. The final, crucial element came from high-level diplomatic reports. International partners needed firm confidence that the monarchy was a symbol of stability and centralization. Prolonged internal turmoil had begun to erode the confidence of public opinion leaders and policymakers in allied nations. The issue has transcended the realm of a family conflict to become a major foreign policy concern. The government needs a decisive solution to maintain national prestige. William realizes that if he cannot manage stability within his own home, global partners will question his ability to shoulder greater responsibilities in the future. All these pressures have converged, leading to the historic declaration at 7:48 this morning, a drastic action to protect the future of the monarchy. When personal turmoil transforms into complex political problems, silence is no longer a safe haven. The final and most instinctive decision doesn't come from dry reports, but from William's heart. Throughout the final months of the year, he witnessed Catherine facing the storms of public opinion with a proud serenity. He saw his father shouldering the unresolved family rifts and saw the children growing up under the scrutinizing gaze of the outside world. At that threshold, William realized a harsh truth. The responsibility of protecting the peace of his wife and children had to take precedence over any fragile hopes of reconciliation. In a moment of quiet reflection, he admitted to Catherine that he could not repair what was broken and that continuing to try would only further hurt those he was obligated to protect. A historic declaration is never built on a blank slate. It is the convergence of four powerful forces. Princess Anne provided a sharp strategic framework. The legal team established a solid textual foundation. The Foreign Office affirmed the necessity of international standing. And finally, it was William himself who infused it with an unwavering personal resolve. As December approached, the question was no longer whether to act, but how to execute the most decisive separation. On the evening of December 1st, a small strategic council convened in his private study at Windsor. Though the fire still burned in the fireplace, the winter chill seemed to seep through the cracks in the doors, weighing down the space like a tangible entity. William arrived first, carrying a draft he had meticulously crafted over 48 hours. Every phrase had to carry the precise weight he intended for it would shape his entire reign. King Charles entered, bearing the appearance of someone burdened by immense sorrow. In his eyes, one could see the pain of a father witnessing the irreparable breakdown of blood ties. Following him was Princess Anne, who firmly believed that an institution could only survive if it protected itself from constant upheaval. Emotions, however intense, should not paralyze the actions necessary to maintain stability. Catherine's arrival changed the atmosphere in the room. Although she rarely participated in strategic meetings, William needed her presence this time. She understood perfectly well that every decision tonight would directly affect the very lifeblood of their family. William began with a straightforward and decisive manner. He asserted that this was the final decision, with no room for reconsideration, no turning back as emotions cooled. After considering all options from reconciliation to gradually establishing boundaries, he concluded that the current ambiguity was the seed of perpetual instability. As the draft was passed around and silence fell, Catherine spoke in a soft but powerful voice filled with compassion. She reminded them of the profound pain this decision would inflict on those on the other side of the border. It was the moment when royal duty and human emotion clashed most intensely, marking an irreversible turning point. William confronted the harsh reality head-on. He understood the pain of separation, but he also understood that maintaining a state of limbo would only further hurt those closest to him and weaken the foundation entrusted to him by the king. He could not continue to gamble on a distant possibility of reconciliation while neglecting his responsibility to protect the present. King Charles, in a moment of choked emotion, likened this to closing a door that should have been left slightly ajar. But William responded with the steadfastness of a true leader. That door was no longer a passageway, but a gap through which instability could enter. He closed it not with anger, but with the necessary composure for all to move forward together. Princess Anne reminded us of a harsh truth: an institution cannot be led by vague hopes of mending emotional wounds. William was putting his education into practice, prioritizing organizational stability over personal feelings, even if it meant leaving silent scars. Catherine, with her keen insight and empathy, affirmed that the language of this statement was entirely transparent. It contained no aggression. It simply established a new reality. When King Charles concluded the meeting with his trust in his son's judgment, the burden of history seemed to have been transferred. The communiqué will be released at 7:48 a.m. tomorrow, ending any lingering doubts. Precisely at 7:48 a.m. on December 2nd, the official statement was released from Kensington Palace, permanently sealing all avenues of return. In California, amidst the dim twilight, the message arrived like a silent shockwave. It was not the language of bureaucracy, but a direct verdict from an older brother. Silence enveloped the space as this reality was revealed. An insurmountable line had been drawn, a decisive judgment whose intensity no one could have foreseen. Meanwhile, in London, the monarchy's media and legal apparatus operated with absolute efficiency to handle the waves of public opinion from the very first hour. Lara Flynn. Boyle's journey is not merely a story of physical transformation, but a valuable lesson in the philosophy of limits on the path to pursuing beauty. It shows us that in the quest to reclaim youth, one can inadvertently lose the most precious part of their identity. Her story offers a profound lesson in accepting and cherishing the traces of time, for they are what give a person depth. Lara serves as a reminder that the pinnacle of beauty does not lie in flawless perfection, but in authenticity and harmony with the natural order. Once a dazzling icon of intelligence and allure in working girl Melanie Griffith entered the world of fame, carrying all the expectations of the public. Yet behind her high-profile marriages and the scrutinizing gaze of Hollywood, an invisible fear of fading began to grow. To maintain her position among other leading ladies and famous husbands, she inadvertently entered a relentless race with beauty-preserving methods. Decades of continuous interventions gradually built an artificial. This was no longer a pause or a lingering sulk. It was an end. By midday, the silence from the palace had become the final answer. The matter was officially closed. The future of the woman across the ocean would now unfold entirely separate from the orbit of the monarchy. William, having made the most difficult decision of his leadership career, had charted a new course for decades to come. As the winter light faded over London, a new reality began to envelop Meghan Markle's life. The illusion of a tomorrow where time could heal the cracks had completely vanished. William had not merely closed a door, he had declared that path no longer existed. Instead of running away, Melanie Griffith chose a path of courage few in Hollywood dare to take, acknowledging past mistakes and embarking on a journey to rescue her face. She sought out top specialists to undo the excessive interventions, striving to reclaim the natural fragments that remained. While she could not turn back the clock to her youthful beauty, the positive changes that followed stand as a testament to extraordinary resilience. Her story serves as a valuable case study showing that aesthetic pursuits are not a one-way street, and There is no longer any opportunity to reposition oneself as someone who can return when circumstances change, nor any suggestion of reconciliation if the organization accepts flexibility. The future king has turned his judgment into a historical document, something no media campaign can reverse. This is a conflict between modern individual vision and immutable traditional structures. When an individual refuses to compromise and an institution does not collapse, a definitive separation is inevitable. Looking back at the whole affair, we realize that sometimes the kindest thing to do is not to cling to false hope, but to accept reality. Instead of a fulfilling outcome as promised by glowing advertisements, she inadvertently became a victim of techniques lacking the necessary empathy and medical expertise. A harsh intervention on her facial structure caused the once-admired architectural beauty to collapse, leaving irreversible marks on her skin and natural features. By 2026, reflecting on Elsa's journey, one cannot help but be stunned by the extreme contrast. Though she still lives in wealth and prestige, her face has become a mask of sorrow where the flexible expression, the quiet pain of a woman unable to recognize herself in the mirror, is a modern tragedy where material wealth cannot compensate for the loss of personal identity. Elsa Patton's story is not merely a celebrity headline, it is a powerful educational lesson on the limits of aesthetic intervention. It reminds us that behind every promised miracle lie risks capable of permanently stripping a person of confidence and happiness. Elsa courageously shared her suffering as a warning to the world: cherish the harmony of nature and remain mindful of the temptations of art. With the door permanently sealed, a new, mysterious chapter officially opens. Is this verdict a necessary liberation, or merely the beginning of new storms? The ultimate truth always lies in the hidden corners that history has yet to uncover. Will this decisive action truly bring peace to the dynasty? Share your thoughts in the comments below, so we can unravel the mystery together. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to avoid missing more shocking cases. In systems theory, any entity, when abruptly separated and then suddenly returning, generates an impulse that alters the entire existing structure. 3 words that no one in positions of power wants to hear. Right now, Harry is back. After cycles of self-imposed exile and the eruption of opposing streams of information, the sudden appearance of a detached fragment in London is far from merely a media event. From an investigative perspective, this is not a social visit or a routine diplomatic ritual. Could we be witnessing the beginning of a heritage decryption? A mission driven by historical data, obscured for decades, pieces that the system has tried to secure to maintain the stability of the monarchy. The moment the private jet touched down on the runway at RAF Northolt, a gray zone of information began to spread. No ceremonies, no smiles for the cameras. This presence carried the character of a discreet system intrusion. The unusual increase in royal security around Clarence House, unexplained and sudden, is a reflexive instinct of the institution in response to an unpredictable variable. Why has silence become the palace's primary tool at this moment? In information analysis, silence is rarely a lack of data. Rather, it is a tactic to control cracks that are slowly emerging. Harry no longer appears as a lost individual. Instead, he embodies an aura of absolute consistency. No defiance, no anger, but the assurance of someone who holds a crucial key, one capable of rewriting the entire script that the system has long maintained. Behind closed doors, senior officials seem to be facing a ghost from the past. Decisions once considered essential to protect the crown are now suddenly becoming fragile. As the truth begins to leak through the cracks of the power structure, how will the entire system react to prevent a chain reaction of collapse? This comeback is not spontaneous. It feels like the fateful intersection point, where events that began years ago have finally reached a point of collision. Has Harry discovered a truth powerful enough to break even the oldest security protocols? We stand at a historical crossroads. Is this the final attempt at transparency, or the beginning of a new chapter where heritage secrets will no longer be the most secure protective barrier? What is your hypothesis? 1. Did Harry return to seek genuine reconciliation under new conditions? 2. Or did he bring with him a truth key that would force the system to change permanently? Share your analysis in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the second half of this investigation, where we'll unravel what's really behind the whispers at the palace. Those who believe Harry is merely seeking attention must confront a completely different reality. He didn't return to relive the past, but to reconciliation with it. As the palace walls seemed to hold their breath, a disturbing theory began to spread. What if Harry's entire belief system about his identity had been meticulously orchestrated from the very beginning? Internal sources from Highgrove Manor revealed the existence of a sealed file bearing an identifier, Operation Guardian. This is not part of a royal ceremony, but appears to be a security protocol never before published. The appearance of this file, bearing the late Queen's coat of arms and linked to Charles Windsor's name just weeks after the 1997 Paris attacks, opened a rift in Harry's identity structure. Inside that file, the most haunting element wasn't the administrative documents, but a handwritten letter from a woman who had long been silent. Diana, from a strategic analysis perspective, this letter contains not only emotions, but also a blueprint. System alert. Diana seemed to have foreseen a scenario being constructed behind her back, a mechanism designed to shield her youngest son from a truth she believed he deserved to face when the time was right. The reaction from the royal legal apparatus was immediate and forceful. An attempt to block the flow of information was launched, but it seemed too late. Harry, with cold certainty, issued a landmark statement: "I have the right to know, and now the whole world will know too." This is not anger, but a re-establishment of ownership over a personal history that has been manipulated. This investigation leads us to a complex network of secret guardians. A chilling entry was discovered in Princess Anne's personal diary in 2003. The exile pact must remain in effect. He must not know about it. The big question here is, what did they agree to expel him from? Anne, the embodiment of steadfastness, now appears as a guardian of the crown's deepest truths. William's quiet involvement and Camilla's stabilization role further reinforced the hypothesis of a coordinated effort to maintain the current structure at all costs. Every diplomatic smile now seems a protective shell for a silent agreement. It has existed for 2 decades. We are faced with a paradox of truth and loyalty. As the layers of Operation Guardian are gradually peeled away, the picture of British royal stability is being subjected to unprecedented pressure. What is your hypothesis? 1. Are these secrets necessary tools to protect the survival of the throne? 2. Or is transparency the only remedy to mend the rifts in the brotherly and fatherly relationships? Please leave a comment with the number. If you believe that the truth needs to be revealed in its entirety or number. If you believe there are secrets that are best left undisturbed in order to maintain the integrity of the institution. Press like and subscribe to the channel. Join us in our in-depth investigation into the power dynamics hidden behind the glitz and glamour. In an institution where survival depends on legitimacy, stability is not just a goal, but a tactic for navigating the flow of information. From a systems analysis perspective, we see a persistent effort to protect the concepts of lineage matrix and bloodline heritage. In 2019, an information hygiene protocol was activated to divert international press attention away from DNA theories. The goal was clear: to prevent a crisis of confidence that could turn royal standards into an uncontrolled topic of discussion. Beyond just media coverage, legal barriers have been erected to delay any investigation into the transparency of succession documents. All requests for data access are denied under the guise of privacy protection, but in reality, this is how the system protects its resources. Breakpoint: his most sensitive moments. However, the truth often finds a way to emerge through silences. The most devastating shock for Harry didn't come from legal obstacles, but from a symbolic silence. In the final days of Queen Elizabeth II, a final covenant was made. Every senior member received a sealed letter of blessing except for Harry. Was this exclusion a mistake, or the final consolidation of the Covenant of Silence? Long-standing for Meghan, this is an unmistakable signal Harry has been turned into a pawn in a large-scale preservation strategy. Throughout the years of conflict and exile, the chaos we see is actually a meticulously orchestrated scenario to conceal a fundamental truth, one that leads directly to the most powerful figure today, King Charles. In an isolated area of Balmoral Castle, where secrets are usually kept hidden by the stillness of the forest, a fateful dialogue unfolds. Now standing face to face with his father, the highest guardian of the system, Harry asks for a resolution. Absolute exposure. No assistance, no media, only the truth, and irreparable cracks remained. In that private room, the tension built up by decades of avoidance reached a breaking point. King Charles, his voice heavy with regret and resignation, seemed to have acknowledged something that shattered every piece of his identity Harry had ever held. It was no longer a family conversation. It was a moment that life script. The story of a prince is completely torn apart, revealing a naked reality behind the velvet curtain. Finally, all the masks were removed. The existence of the Highgrove files, codenamed Operation Guardian. And the haunting letter from Diana has been officially confirmed. Charles doesn't deny it. He admits to having approved it from the very beginning. From a systems analysis perspective, this is an attempt to establish a hypothetical safe zone to protect Harry from psychological trauma. However, for Harry, this wasn't protection, but a battle, denying the right to self-determination and individual identity in a systematic way. The burden of the accusation, "You have chosen duty over truth," now hung like a knife cutting into the foundations of the dynasty. Charles, in a state of profound shock, attempted to explain the impossible. The post-Diana era was a time when the royal institution fell into a serious operational crisis. To preserve it, system integrity, and with the line of succession so fragile, a special arrangement was implemented, a scenario Diana had vehemently opposed during her lifetime. The king's silence in response to the question, "Am I part of the plan?" that is the most accurate answer. In the world of symbols of power, individuals are sometimes merely pawns in a larger-scale survival strategy. The meeting at Balmoral did not end with a solution, but with a resolution. Tactical retreat. Harry walked away, leaving behind a king haunted by the very secrets he had once so painstakingly guarded. The portraits of Diana were covered up at Clarence House, not out of disrespect, but as a manifestation of a psychological pressure of inheritance. That's too much. However, the final variable lies in a rebellious act from the mother's past. Diana's voice, frozen in recordings and handwritten letters, was unearthed from an ancient, secure safe. The message was simple: "To my son if they ever try to silence you." This shows that Diana had anticipated this confrontation decades in advance. She had established the last line of defense. For Harry, an information loop is only opened when the system attempts to control him again. Diana has always lived in fear of her being erased and her memories reshaped by power structures. But she managed to establish one fail-safe backup mechanism for the future. The recording begins with words carrying the weight of thousands of unshed tears, an echo from the past, affirming that the system has failed to bury the truth. She spoke not as a royal symbol, but as an instinctive protector. Diana presented a chillingly detailed theory about a systematic strategy aimed at severing the emotional connection between her and her sons. This is an attempt to controlling the flow of emotional data, minimizing her influence to preserve the institution's image at all costs. Diana's whispered words, "They thought you wouldn't ask anything, but I knew you would." This officially broke the silence in Harry's mind. A name not found in official records, yet clearly present through subtle hints: bloodline. This not only shook the very foundations of identity Harry had accepted, but it was also the ultimate liberation. The instincts that had been keeping Harry awake all this time weren't delusions, but rather the echo of truth, which his mother had sealed away, waiting for this very moment. For Harry, this was no longer a confirmation of pain, but freedom. A freedom not controlled by any royal script. With Diana's words still echoing in his ears, Harry made a choice that shook the very foundations of the monarchy. A 72-hour ultimatum. It was sent directly to the king's private secretary. This is not a threat, but a challenge. Public reconciliation. Either the system must reveal the truth itself, or Harry will be the one to lift the curtain. This single, strategically significant email has put the royal press office in a precarious situation. Systemic chaos. The palace walls no longer whispered, but roared in the face of the most explosive confrontation in modern history. Within, the power struggle of the dynasty time was no longer on the side of the gatekeepers. Control over the flow of information had officially shifted from the institution to Harry. A frequency collision. A heated argument ensued between the two heirs. William, in a last-ditch effort to protect the stability of the system, attempted to trigger emotional barriers from the past. However, Harry responded with a cold conviction: "The system chose duty over my identity." This is no longer a personal debate, but a refusal to compromise of an entity that has seen through the entire operating mechanism of the organization. Behind that decisiveness is Meghan, who plays the role of a strategic catalyst. After a long period of silence, she urged Harry to undertake a mission: Anatomy of the Past thoroughly. The goal is not revenge, but to unleash the system to reclaim her true identity. Meanwhile, Camilla is present in a state of defensive chaos. Her attempts to establish a legal wall to silence this variable completely failed in the face of King Charles's exhaustion. The king's whispered words, "It's too late." This was an admission of the collapse of all the oldest security barriers. The Windsor institution was paralyzed, with half attempting to appease public opinion and the other half holding their breath in the face of a crisis. The heritage has been distorted. It's about to be revealed. Harry wasn't just planning a typical press release. he was orchestrating a whole new one: media revolution. In an unprecedentedly bold statement, Harry broke all royal protocol. He directly connected with the public through digital platforms, without intermediaries, without censorship, and without a script crafted by PR professionals. This was a significant move: direct decoding. He sent it to millions, exposing the secrets that had haunted him for years. Harry wasn't looking for a sensational headline. He was undertaking a mission. Verify the facts. On a large scale, it asserted that the world deserves to hear what really happened behind the glamorous velvet curtain. Harry no longer held back any reservations. He began with a statement breaking decades of silence. "They lied to me and they lied to you all." From an investigative perspective, this is a case system audit, the most public in history. Harry exposed the entire structure of Guardian campaign, the coded entries in Anne's diary, and especially Diana's message from the afterlife. The message, "My mother has always just wanted me to be free." It resonated across continents, transforming an internal secret into a shared human pain. The truth was no longer confined within the walls of Balmoral. It had become the property of the public. In just a few hours, the digital world exploded in a revolution. Global payments. Hashtags such as Royal Reckoning. Good justice for Harry. It's not just a media trend, but an expression of a movement demanding transparency. However, the palace's reaction is what's most shocking: 24 hours of absolute silence. In communication theory, this silence is called a risky, strategic vacuum. The lack of rebuttal or statement is tacit confirmation of the existence of the forbidden protocols that the royal family has long feared. The institution, once proud of its stability, is now facing a profound crisis of confidence, where old rituals are no longer sufficient to conceal internal rifts. Outside Buckingham Palace, crowds gathered not to protest in the usual way, but to establish a new order of trust. The banners tell the truth, and Diana deserves to be treated better. This demonstrates how Diana's legacy transformed from personal pain into a driving force for systemic change. This is not just Harry's story. It's a lesson about the price of silence and the collapse of old values before the unfiltered power of truth. A deep crack has formed at the very core of the monarchy, a crack that directly threatens the very survival of the Windsor kingdom in the new era. Within the power structure of the kingdom, the emergence of a transparency variable from Harry has created a powerful counter-impact on William, a figure previously considered the central pillar of stability. Behind that resolute exterior lies a struggle, a civil war of the mind, caught between loyalty to the institution and the pain of fractured trust. For the first time in years, the heir to the throne undertook a mission: tactical retreat away from the front lines of defense. The abrupt cancellation of public routes and the establishment of a zone of silence at Anmer Hall was not merely a personal break, but a sign of system paralysis. In that isolated space, William is confronted with a grim paradox. Is the organization he has dedicated his life to protecting truly the one that orchestrated the manipulative schemes against his loved ones? The climax of this crisis lies in the decision to implement a campaign. Data audit. Most aggressively, William demanded direct access to the original files of Guardian campaign. This is the moment when the guardian of the institution decides to confront the forbidden data zones himself. Sitting alone amidst Diana's past footage and Harry's current statements, William seems to be undergoing a process. Psychological restructuring, profound. What was recorded in that sealed file became a life-changing variable, shaking all the values he had once considered fundamental. When the key to the truth is revealed to the heir, his silence is no longer a defense, but a preparation for a confrontation. Redefining heritage, an action that could permanently alter the future structure of British royal power. The tension was now undeniable. The man trained to endure in silence was beginning to face a systemic crossroads. For the first time, William, in the eyes of observers, seemed to be questioning whether the price of maintaining the regime's stability was exceeding acceptable limits. Not just for Harry, but for the entire family structure upon which this institution relies for survival. He understood perfectly what the system expected: stability, absolute loyalty, and above all, disciplined silence. However, alongside that expectation, another layer of consciousness was supposedly emerging. Not the consciousness of an heir, but of a son, a brother carrying memories that had never truly closed. From a psychological systemic analysis perspective, this was the moment when individual identity began to clash with predetermined roles. Some indirect sources suggest that William is not merely reacting, but is calculating, not with impulsive emotions, but with cautious, deliberate steps. And that's what makes the internal atmosphere more unpredictable than ever. The hypothesis is that the next decision, if any, will not stem from the title, but from memory. From the image of a mother who once tried to speak up in a system that was unaccustomed to listening. When two brothers stand on opposite sides of the same history, the entire structure around them is forced to pause and observe. In large systems, turning points rarely come with noise. They usually come from a quiet but irreversible choice. And then, according to recorded signs, the monarchy's reaction emerges. Not in the form of punishment nor exclusion, instead a move that surprises many an offer powerful enough to become the new glue or the catalyst for complete collapse. A few days after Harry's speech, which sparked widespread global interpretation, a secret message was delivered, not through the press, not through public legal channels, but through a personal envoy. The letter bore the official seal, but its tone was unusual, unceremonious, not commanding merely a proposal for a private dialogue away from the spotlight and the chaos. To some, this might be seen as a signal to de-escalate tensions. To others, it raises questions about a familiar delaying tactic. According to various theories, the family's reaction was not uniform. There is caution resistance and the memory of previous dialogues that failed to bring about substantive change. What makes this moment different from an analytical perspective is not the content of the letter, but the context. When an individual is no longer seeking approval, but clarity, every invitation takes on a different meaning. Is this an opportunity for a genuine restructuring of the relationship, or merely a last-ditch effort by a system seeking to maintain control of the narrative? And if that dialogue does take place, who will truly listen, and who will confront the issues that have been delayed for so long? Speculation about the king's health began to surface as noise in a system designed to shield information. According to circulating theories, the prolonged pressures of his role, sleepless nights, and a series of urgent meetings may have led him to reflect more deeply on time and his legacy. There were whispers that he himself had carefully chosen the words in the letter, not as a command, but as a final message to be delivered, while the opportunity still remained. Under the lens of systemic analysis, this was not a sign of weakness, but rather a reflex of a structure facing its own limitations. The proposed conditions were audaciously minimalist. A private meeting between the two brothers, no staff, no press, no recording equipment, just the people and the distance that needed to be faced. After days of deliberation, the agreement was reached not out of optimism, but out of the realization that the longer the unspoken words lingered, the more fragile the system became. Those around them maintained a cautious attitude. Protectiveness and wariness went hand in hand, but everyone sensed a subtle shift like the wind changing direction before a storm. Behind closed walls, discussions began to emerge. Not about protocol, but about the possibility of restructuring for a different era, one where difficult acknowledgments, unconventional meetings, and decisions once considered impossible were put on the table. Some advisors presumably considered contingency plans, not redefining right and wrong, but repositioning roles, seeing Harry as a potential contributor to the future rather than a symbol of division. Yet this was not reconciliation. Not yet. It was a fragile balance where an ill-considered remark could shatter what had just been rebuilt. But for the rare occasion in years, the two sides entered the same space not as adversaries, but as a family trying to listen to each other. That family was fractured, yet still connected, albeit thinly. Then a final piece of information emerged, a short, anonymous statement from a senior aide. No context, no explanation, just a single line that made observers and constitutional experts pause to ponder. If Harry had returned, perhaps not in the usual way. The story thus continued to unfold, with truths to be examined, relationships to be mended, and secrets to be approached only through questioning. The content you've just watched is for reference only, built from hypotheses, analytical perspectives, and unverified public opinions. It is not an official statement or conclusion. The goal of this video is to open a space for objective discussion where everyone can think and evaluate based on their own reasoning. Now it's your turn to speak. Press 1 if you are curious about the hypotheses presented. Press 0 if you remain skeptical and want to wait for clearer evidence. Don't forget to like and subscribe to continue peeling back the layers of information behind the curtain of silence, where the truth only emerges when we dare to ask questions. If you looked at the viral images of those 7 mysterious suitcases sitting on the tarmac at LAX and assumed that was the absolute climax of this saga, you have likely missed the bigger picture. And if you believed the dramatic narrative ended when that private jet made an emergency diversion to a high-security military base in Sicily, you are mistaken again. In reality, those explosive events were merely the prologue, a chaotic setup for a much more intense and calculated chapter that is only now beginning to unfold. We are moving beyond the spectacle and entering the most critical phase of this entire investigation, the revelation of cold, hard, and irrefutable evidence. And the man who played the decisive role in this turnaround was the Sussexes' old rival, Piers Morgan, a controversial figure whose image is associated with constant warnings to the public. He has been criticized as bitter, even scheming, but today what he is bringing is completely different. Immediately after news broke about Meghan Markle's arrest in Italy with undeclared $12 million in cash, Piers Morgan wasted no time in coming forward. This appearance was a marked departure from his usual style. He wasn't there merely to offer personal anecdotes or subjective commentary. Instead, he arrived armed with a substantial, meticulously organized dossier that seemed to physically validate the fragmented truths that had been slowly percolating across social media platforms. With a gravity that silenced the room, Piers Morgan made a declaration that resonated with finality. "I've seen her bank records. She's ruined." The tension within the studio became so palpable that the air felt heavy, and not a single colleague dared to interject. At that moment, the noise of celebrity gossip faded away, replaced entirely by the cold authority of documents and financial figures, shocking revelations that he asserted were sourced directly from an active forensic audit, currently being executed by Prince Harry's own legal counsel. The sheer magnitude of this truth was something that caught even seasoned observers completely off guard. It increasingly appeared that Prince Harry's legal team was executing a sophisticated tactical maneuver utilizing Piers Morgan as an unofficial conduit to leak privileged information before any Hollywood PR spin doctors had a chance to intervene or sanitize the narrative. The broadcast itself began in a manner that was deeply unsettling. There was no opening music, no frenetic energy, just a heavy, suffocating silence that spoke volumes. Piers sat motionless, his eyes locked onto the camera lens with a look of absolute conviction, devoid of his usual theatricality. When he finally broke the tension, his words were not a question, but a somber vindication. "I warned you all from the very beginning that this was a hoax. I warned you that those tears were nothing more than a performance." He pressed on, his voice dropping, as he addressed the audience with a mix of vindication and genuine disbelief. Even with my notorious skepticism, I never could have fathomed that she would be implicated in something of this magnitude, a sophisticated $12 million money laundering operation routed through a shadowy shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. But we are past the point of speculation. These are undeniable metrics, and they are right here before our eyes. With a deliberate motion, Piers flipped open the dossier to a specific page, prompting the studio cameras to zoom in until the text filled the screens at home. While the sensitive account numbers were heavily redacted with thick black ink to comply with legal standards, the entity listed at the top was starkly legible: Arch Illumination Limited. It was revealed to be a liquidation account held at Silicon Valley Bank, explicitly flagging an urgent wire transfer with a final destination of Dubai. These leaked files appear to serve as the final corroborating puzzle piece, validating the fragmented details that have surfaced in previous independent investigations. What we are witnessing here is not random spending, but a documented pattern of systematic withdrawals hemorrhaging from the Sussexes' joint accounts, a timeline that stretches back exactly 18 months. Piers drew the audience's attention to a critical timestamp buried in the ledger, his finger tapping the screen for emphasis. "Focus on this date," he commanded. "This isn't a coincidence. This marks the exact day the Spotify partnership was publicly terminated." The implication was devastatingly clear the very moment their primary revenue stream evaporated. She allegedly initiated a series of unauthorized transfers. This behavior cannot be dismissed as a momentary lapse or financial panic. Rather, it bears all the hallmarks of a cold, calculated diversion of assets designed to secure capital before the ship went down. What infused Piers's reaction with such visceral impact was not just shock but the chilling clarity of recognition. He knew exactly who he was looking at in that grainy LAX airport footage. He recounted a specific encounter with this woman at an exclusive media finance conference in London years prior, where she wasn't discussing public relations but was evangelizing aggressive high-stakes tax avoidance strategies tailored for the ultra-elite. "I knew the nature of her character from that very moment," he stated with grim certainty. "She was a shark in a tailored suit." Seeing this specific figure standing shoulder to shoulder with Meghan on the tarmac signaled that the situation had escalated beyond simple celebrity management. The conclusion was inescapable: the game was over. Meghan hadn't hired a business manager to handle her career. She had retained a professional cleaner to sanitize the trail. Piers then proceeded to drop perhaps the most explosive bombshell of the night, revealing a specific detail that has never before entered the public domain. He exposed a wire transfer totaling exactly $2 million drained from Prince Harry's private trust, the sacred inheritance left to him by the late Queen Mother. Crucially, these funds were not moved to a joint holding, but were funneled directly into an account over which Meghan exercised absolute unilateral control. The timing of this transaction is chilling. It was executed exactly 3 days before the chaotic incident unfolded at LAX airport. This timeline forces us to ask the question that is now echoing across the internet. Is this merely a bizarre coincidence, or are we witnessing the final steps of a meticulously planned exit strategy? We want to hear your perspective on this theory. Leave your thoughts in the comments section below, and make sure to like and subscribe to the channel so you remain on the front line of this developing story as we continue to uncover the truth. The tremble in Piers' voice was unmistakable, vibrating with a level of visceral rage that seemed to shake the very desk he sat behind. As he pored over the damning documents spread out before him, his demeanor shifted from professional analysis to pure moral outrage. She didn't just drain a bank account. She took the entire inheritance that Harry's grandmother specifically bequeathed to secure his future. He seethed. Let's call this what it really is. That is not business, that is grave robbing. His words sliced through the stifling tension of the studio like a razor, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. He proceeded to dissect the financial statement we had uncovered line by line, his tone completely stripped of his usual wit or humor. "She genuinely thinks the FBI are fools, doesn't she?" he asked rhetorically, locking eyes with the camera. "She seems to believe that just because she acted out a role on a TV show, she possesses the capability to outsmart seasoned federal agents. But it is exactly that profound arrogance, that blinding delusion of invincibility, that is guaranteed to be her ultimate downfall." Piers Morgan continued his forensic deconstruction of the event, distinguishing clearly between a simple procedural error and a serious violation of federal law. Let's be clear about the legal reality here. Had she simply declared the currency upon entry, she likely would have faced nothing more than a standard administrative fine or a civil penalty. However, by willfully falsifying a federal customs declaration form, she has irrevocably escalated this situation from a minor infraction into a full-blown criminal felony. Piers then shifted his focus to the sociological fallout, analyzing the unprecedented reaction, or rather the lack thereof, from the Sussex fan community. In any normal news cycle, his social media feeds would be inundated with vitriol-coordinated attacks and accusations of lying. Yet this time, the digital landscape was eerily, surprisingly silent. "Why is there such radio silence?" he asked, leaning in. The answer is simple. You can debate a subjective opinion until you are blue in the face, but you cannot debate hard-cold paper evidence. With a gesture of supreme confidence, Piers tapped the stack of financial records on his desk, visually demonstrating that he had effectively neutralized Meghan's online army, not with rhetoric, but with unassailable facts. Piers paused, looking directly into the lens as he addressed the invisible audience of his former detractors. Where is the outraged chorus now? Where are the vocal critics who branded me a monster simply for daring to ask the uncomfortable questions? He challenged. Was it truly an act of cruelty to inquire why a duchess would be transporting suitcases filled with liquid cash onto a high-security military base in Sicily, or was I simply performing the fundamental, often gritty duty of an investigative journalist? Then the broadcast took a turn that no one saw coming, a sudden palpable shift in emotional temperature. For the first time in years, Piers Morgan dropped his guard to express a rare, genuine sympathy for Prince Harry. He reframed the narrative entirely, painting Harry not as a willing accomplice, but as a man who had been psychologically hollowed out, manipulated, and robbed blind. Let's be honest about the reality here, Piers asserted with a somber gravity. Harry is a man who made a catastrophic error in judgment, yes, But looking at these files, he is no longer just a participant. He is the primary victim of a sophisticated crime. He went further, constructing a powerful argument that Prince Harry requires immediate physical and psychological separation from the Duchess. In Piers's evolving thesis, the dynamic is no longer being framed as a partnership, but rather as a clear case of predator versus prey where Harry is the unwitting victim in need of extraction. But Piers didn't stop at psychological profiling. In a move that kept viewers glued to their screens, he teased the existence of a smoking gun document, a piece of evidence so volatile that strict legal constraints currently prevent its full publication. However, he made a solemn promise to unveil it in the next installment of this investigation. He described the item in chilling detail, a digital correspondence originating from Meghan's private encrypted server and directed to a high-level contact in Dubai. The timestamp is critical, dated exactly 1 week prior to that fateful flight. The subject line consisted of 2 simple yet ominous words: "Package ready." Piers posited that this email serves as definitive proof of long-term premeditation. It suggests that while she was publicly smiling for the cameras alongside Harry at the Invictus Games, projecting the image of a supportive spouse, she was simultaneously operating in the shadows, sending critical logistical coordinates to her accomplices. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment escape. It was a master plan months in the making. "She is finished," Piers reiterated with absolute conviction, punctuating his verdict by slamming the thick dossier shut on the desk with a resounding thud. This isn't just the end of her tenure as a working member of the royal family, nor is it merely the collapse of her celebrity brand. By crossing these legal lines, she has effectively signed away her own freedom. He painted a stark picture of the future, stripping away the glamour that usually surrounds the Duchess. Mark my words, the next time the world catches a glimpse of Meghan Markle, she won't be draped in haute couture or wearing a custom Dior gown on a red carpet. She will be standing before a federal judge in a court of law. And rest assured, I will be there seated front and center, documenting every single second of accountability. Piers made it clear that his intense reaction was a necessary step in validating a scandal many had dismissed. By staking his reputation on these documents, Piers Morgan has dramatically amplified the scope of this investigation, commanding the attention of the global press. The impact was instantaneous. Across the Atlantic, editors at major British tabloids were reportedly stopping the presses, scrambling to revise their front pages to feature his defining declaration in bold, unforgiving headlines, "I have seen the files." He took a moment to emphasize the sheer scale of the forensic undertaking involved, describing the recovery of deleted tweets, scrubbed statements, and digital cover-ups, not just as research, but as a digital archaeological dig. He stressed that piecing together these fragments of truth from a deliberate campaign of obfuscation is a time-consuming and laborious task that requires significant resources. Piers then pivoted directly to the audience, issuing an urgent call to action. He encouraged viewers to support the channel's mission by becoming official members, framing this financial support not merely as a donation, but as the fuel necessary to help this story bypass the mainstream media gatekeepers and spread to a wider global audience. Moving seamlessly into the second half of the broadcast, Piers introduced a segment he provocatively titled "The Bag Flipping Game." He strode confidently across the studio to a massive electronic smartboard which flickered to life to reveal a complex visual diagram of the alleged theft. He traced the path with his finger, demonstrating that this wasn't a simple linear transfer from the Archewell Foundation directly to Meghan's personal luggage. Instead, the graphic displayed a labyrinthine spiderweb of transactions, an intricate network designed to confuse auditors and hide the true origin of the funds. At the heart of all the transactions was a Delaware-registered company called Project Phoenix LLC, which Piers claimed served as the funnel for receiving the money. Every payment from Netflix, Spotify, or Penguin Random House goes into a shared account, and within 48 hours a corresponding amount is transferred to Project Phoenix to pay for consulting services. Harry signed off on these payments. Piers pointed to the screen, drawing the audience's attention. "Look at that signature," he continued. "That's Harry's signature, but the dates don't match." This shows that these signatures were not real. They were just digital copies. Meghan didn't need Harry's approval for every transaction. She already had his electronic signature on file and automatically approved the funds. Harry was deceived, approving millions of dollars while busy playing polo or writing books. All through a single PDF file, and the truth revealed changed Harry's role from an accomplice to a victim of identity fraud. The unauthorized use of his electronic signature for each transaction constitutes the crime of signature forgery. Piers didn't stop there. He went on to highlight a crucial transaction, a $2 million withdrawal fee taken from the Queen Mother's Trust, the last remaining funds tied to Harry's family history. The receiving account, a Dubai bank called JRA Sovereign Holdings, confirmed the severity of the theft. Colleagues on set were furious, whispering to each other, "She took the Queen Mother's money." The money that was supposed to protect Harry was instead used to aid Meghan's escape. This wasn't just greed, but an act of revenge, a challenge to the organization that bestowed upon her the title she now hides behind Piers Morgan. After dealing with the legal threat, Piers moved on to the previously leaked emails. While unable to provide actual screenshots due to legal requirements, he did read verifiable excerpts. An email sent to an architect listed the assets to be liquidated, and not just cash. Piers read each item aloud. First, Diana's watch. Second, the Cartier bracelet. Third, the diamond engagement ring. He paused, his expression serious. Meghan wasn't just taking cash. She also planned to sell jewelry associated with Princess Diana gifts from Harry items symbolizing their love. Piers emphasized that the items were estimated to be worth up to $450,000, and they needed to be sold urgently. He asserted that selling Diana's jewelry on the black market in Dubai was a profound insult not only to the royal family, but also to the British people. Harry, who had always been proud of his mother, would see this as a grave betrayal, viewing her family's heirlooms as easily liquidated commodities. It would be an unimaginable psychological shock. Royal biographer Tom Bower, who was expected to appear on the show later, was overheard in the waiting room, sadly acknowledging the scale of the theft. Piers concluded with a strong plea to the Italian authorities: "Don't let her go. Confiscate her luggage and search her carry-on. If that Cartier watch is in there, she's smuggling stolen royal property." When the show returned after the commercial break, the atmosphere shifted from investigative outrage to justifiable vindication. Piers addressed the Hollywood elite directly. "For years you have lectured us, awarded her prizes, and honored her as an icon fighting against systemic racism. So where are you all today?" Piers named the powerful representatives at WME who signed contracts with Meghan, despite knowing full well that her financial books had been manipulated. He criticized her celebrity friends who lent her private jets, acting as carriers of illegal cargo. "You're not supporting a humanitarian," Piers continued. "You're covering up the reputation of a fraud. By protecting her and silencing her critics, you're complicit. You created the shield so she could embezzle $12 million. This is the Piers Morgan effect. Reclaim the awards. Admit if you've been cheated. Otherwise, I'll assume you already know." The next segment of the program revealed a shocking piece of information after the commercial break. A senior member of the British royal family contacted Piers not for an interview, but simply to say 2 words: "Thank you." This person felt unable to speak the truth, unable to defend themselves, but today they sensed that justice was finally being served. The king was watching. That thank you officially confirmed everything and showed Piers was acting as a secret communication channel for the monarchy. Piers also didn't forget to move on to political issues, particularly the interference of the Internal Revenue Service, IRS. How can a woman transfer $12 million through American banks without IRS interference? Piers questioned. If I transferred $10,000, they would audit me for a whole year. The story becomes increasingly complicated and the questions grow heavier. Will justice truly be served? Or is it all just an elaborate charade? We'll have to wait and see what further revelations come, but this story certainly won't end so easily. She has transferred millions of dollars, and now Piers Morgan is relentlessly raising thorny questions about political protection. He raises rumors that Meghan Markle is being groomed for a Senate seat and is building a network of connections with top Democratic fundraisers. Is she being protected? Is there a no-holds-barred approach to Sussexes records because Meghan is considered a valuable political asset? If so, this is not just a celebrity scandal, but potentially corruption at the highest levels of the U.S. government. Piers called for a congressional hearing demanding the release of suspicious reports from the banks. I want to see that report. I want to know which bank manager discovered it and who covered it up. There can't be 7 suitcases of cash on the runway and no one in power turned a blind eye, Piers said. He invited Dr. Orwell, a forensic psychologist, to join via satellite. Piers asked, "Is she insane or evil?" Dr. Orwell replied coldly, "She's not insane, Piers." Based on the analysis of the power structure and the transformation of the characters involved in this investigation, what are your thoughts? If you find Piers Morgan and the experts' arguments to be valid, please leave a comment. Number 2 in the comments section. If you believe this is just a misunderstanding or a staged scenario to tarnish reputation, please leave a comment. Number 5, don't forget to press like and subscribe to the channel. Join us now as we continue to unravel the hidden corners and complex systems in our upcoming videos. Your support is our motivation to seek the truth. She is a highly extreme, antisocial personality disorder. The plans, the architect, the fake costumes, it's all cold, calculated, rational work. Piers relentlessly criticized she feels no guilt. She's just afraid of being caught. Right now she's sitting in a jail cell in Sicily. She doesn't regret stealing the money. She regrets that the pilot diverted the plane. At the end of the program, Piers held up the last photograph of Prince Harry taken the day before. Harry looked haggard, pale, and lonely. Piers said softly, "Look at him. This is what happens when you let a vampire into your house." She drained his bank account, his joy, his family, and his reputation. Now he's just an empty shell. The man who fought in Afghanistan has been defeated by a Hallmark actress. Looking directly into the camera, Piers continued, "Harry, if you're watching, pick up the phone. Call your father not to ask for money but to apologize, because the only people who will visit you in the hospice are the family you betrayed." Piers went on to announce that the U.S. ambassador to Italy had arrived at the base in Sicily. Don't let them make a deal. Keep an eye on the State Department, Piers warned viewers. If they try to sneak her back to a private clinic in Malibu for burnout treatment, we'll riot. She should be in jail, not at a spa. At the end of the program, Piers welcomed an unexpected guest, a former U.S. federal prosecutor specializing in international organized crime and large-scale asset seizures. This wasn't a famous lawyer seeking attention. "This is the man who sent drug cartels to jail," Piers introduced. The colleagues asked the question everyone wanted answered. Considering the charges of fraud, cyber fraud, money laundering, and misappropriation of trust funds, how long will she face in prison? The prosecutor remained calm and replied, "Ladies and gentlemen, if the evidence you present is credible, then this is not a light punishment. We are facing a serious case under the Criminal Influential and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. Meghan Markle, through a network of shell companies and offshore banks, orchestrated a complex scheme that carries a mandatory minimum sentence. Combined with charges of cyber fraud, customs violations, and illegal transaction structures, she faces a sentence of 20 to 30 years in prison without parole. Piers Morgan questioned her ability to avoid severe punishment, especially given her status as a duchess and mother of a prince's children. But the prosecutor shook his head. Not this time. The king had stripped her of her title, and the State Department was also suffering embarrassment as the incident humiliated the U.S. government at a NATO military base. This will be a lesson for all. No house arrest, no yoga retreats, no luxurious life in Monaco. Instead, Meghan will face years in a federal prison, perhaps FCI Dublin or Alderson, where men in khaki uniforms work for 12 cents an hour. From Duchess, she has become a prisoner, a harsh and inevitable transition. The illusions of exile in Dubai have vanished, and now she must face the reality of a 6x8-meter cell. Arteriovenous malformation, AVM, is an extremely dangerous condition in which the blood vessels in the face connect abnormally, forming a tangled network that can rupture at any moment. Jennifer's face was covered with bright red vascular masses, swollen like balloons on the verge of bursting. Every breath and every smile was a gamble with death for Jennifer. To save her life, doctors had to place tissue expanders beneath her facial skin, making her appearance during treatment even more frightening. You wouldn't believe the dramatic transformation she underwent after. As the cameras faded, the message became crystal clear. Stories can be staged, images can be curated, and sympathy can be manufactured, but the numbers do not lie. When the truth finally hits, no title, no fame, and no carefully crafted legend can protect her anymore. Please note, this content is for reference only based on unverified theories and public speculation. We are discussing this through an objective analytical lens. Now I want to hear from you. Press 1 if you believe this theory has merit. Press 0 if you think this is nothing more than baseless rumor. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep uncovering the latest developments behind the veil of secrecy. Secrecy is the foundation of the world's oldest power. For decades, the monarchy guarded its silence until now. A black swan has arrived, a sealed genetic map that shatters history. This isn't a public announcement. It is the precise moment absolute certainty collapses. Princess Anne, the stoic temple guardian, finally cracked. Her rare tears weren't just emotion, they signaled a belief system colliding with an irreversible truth. Before we decode this historic shift, subscribe now. This wasn't a tabloid rumor. The leak bled from the very heart of the royal machine. A flawless system suddenly went dark. Calls were cut. Oak doors slammed. The air at Buckingham Palace wasn't filled with ceremony, but with the suffocating weight of a succession crisis. Everyone in that room knew the stakes. They weren't just facing a document, but the rewriting of history. Reputation can be salvaged, but when science questions the bloodline, there is no retreat. The moment the report touched Anne's hands, the order shattered. Witnesses called it a total collapse of discipline. Her trembling wasn't just nerves, it was the armor cracking. Why would a veteran of political storms unravel over a lab result? Because this wasn't just data. It was the key to a buried secret, validating a dark warning whispered decades ago by Diana herself. Was this fate? Or the final move in a game we were never meant to understand? Diana's letters hid more than pain. They encoded an identity paradox, a flaw in the royal design itself. Anne once dismissed these warnings as paranoia. Now she realizes Diana wasn't venting. She was predicting the future. Whispers are easy to ignore. DNA is not. The physical evidence shattered Anne's composure. Normally, the system neutralizes threats before they surface, but this time the gears jammed. Total paralysis took over. They aren't staying silent out of caution. They are silent because the system has failed. When DNA rewrites history, the rule book burns. Inside the palace, the fear wasn't about managing the media, it was about the collapse of a centuries-old foundation. To understand this panic, we must uncover a secret 1990s pact. Diana the rebel and Anne the guardian, two opposites who should have clashed yet found a dangerous common ground in the shadows. It wasn't politics, it was shared survival. They both saw the hidden fractures in the crown. When the masks dropped, they faced the cold calculation of their reality together. In that silence, a warning was planted, one that became Anne's ghost. Diana wasn't just mourning a broken marriage. She was targeting the bloodline itself, exposing a flaw in a system the world thought was untouchable. That dormant warning has awoken as hard evidence. We are past the point of discovery. Now comes the fallout. If a genetic map can erase a legacy, which side do you choose, the cold facts or the ancient order type 2 for truth? Type 5 for stability. Don't just watch, decide. Like and subscribe now because the next mystery is even darker. Diana didn't name names. She left a system warning. This wasn't fear, it was a calculated failsafe. She rigged the timeline to ensure the truth would eventually surface. From that moment, her bond with Anne became a strategic pact. Through coded notes, they mapped out loops for the next generation's secrets, far too explosive for the monarchy to handle at the time. If the unexpected strikes, you must guard the final data. Diana's whisper wasn't a confession, it was a transfer of command. Anne accepted it as a dark theory only for history to turn it into a crushing, silent burden. Decades passed, but when the cold science of the genetic map surfaced, the truth hit Anne hard. Diana's warnings weren't riddles, they were precise predictions. The ghost has hardened into molecular proof, ready to dismantle the crown's foundation. Even Anne couldn't predict an external variable breaking the royal seal. An unnamed entity ensured this code escaped the dark archives. And the scariest part, this sample didn't come from a doctor's office. It wasn't routine. It was taken. Sources confirm this was Diana's self-preservation algorithm. In her final isolated years, she wasn't seeking medical answers, she was planting proof of identity. Now history collides with science. Marble walls can no longer block genetic truth. Is this a random glitch in the legacy, or is it the inevitable shock the system needs to finally evolve? If you held the key to topple the world's oldest power, what would you choose: eternal silence to keep the peace, or the dangerous road of truth, tell us truth or order? Diana knew she couldn't trust the system. She built a shadow network, a private circle of experts untouchable by the institution. Among them, one specialist crossed the professional line to become a silent witness to history. He saw past the pageantry. He knew the royal machine didn't just preserve history, it rewrote it to ensure survival. Under his watch, a silent biological protocol was executed. This wasn't rebellion, it was information insurance. The sample was vaulted off the grid far beyond the palace's reach, Diana's final defense against a system she could no longer trust. When Paris shattered, the world chaos took over. But Diana's insurance policy didn't trigger instantly, it went underground. The specialist tracked down Anne with a brutal message: the science contradicts the lie. Torn between her vow and the crown's survival, Anne made her choice. She didn't act, she buried it. Anne didn't destroy the data. She buried it. Encrypted in the deepest archive layers, it had no digital footprint, a ghost waiting for its cue. After 20 years of silence, the hidden variable woke up. A source from Diana's inner circle triggered the alarm. They didn't need to leak the full file. They just proved the weapon existed, the protocol, the specialist, and the signatures. That was enough. The hypothesis is dead. We are witnessing an irreversible chain reaction. The data exposes unexplainable anomalies in the very heart of the succession. These aren't random biological glitches. They are cracks in the bloodline. The immutable right to rule is finally being questioned. Science has breached the fortress of tradition, and the crisis is absolute. If a single genetic code can topple a kingdom, do we cleanse the system with truth or bury it to save the symbols? Secrets have moved from marble tombs to digital encryption. But when that code breaks, the choice is ours. In a transparent world, do we need necessary lies to protect history, or is truth the only legacy worth fighting for? Drop your analysis below, and follow us as we continue to decode the world's most complex systems. The fallout was immediate and brutal. The upper echelons of power didn't just shake, they cracked. Questions of legitimacy are no longer theories, they are weapons rewriting the equation of authority. Every sacred inheritance law is now on trial. The system scrambled to contain the damage and spin the story, but they failed. The leak unleashed a new, unstoppable, sovereign scientific truth. DNA speaks a language no diplomat can silence. The real shock wasn't the data, it was the breakdown. Princess Anne, the axis of discipline, finally shattered. Witnessing the monarchy's strongest pillar tremble behind closed doors proved one thing. This wasn't a political crisis. It was the death of a belief system. The truth didn't break on the news. It broke in the dim silence of her study. This was profoundly personal. Anne wasn't facing a scandal, she was staring at the historical paradox she had spent decades burying. Witnesses described total paralysis. She froze. She refused to speak to Charles or the heirs. That silence was the sound of the family structure snapping. She refused the summary. She demanded the raw evidence. But when her eyes hit the genetic code, the weight was unbearable even for her. Her tears weren't shock, they were recognition. Deep down, she had always felt the aftershock of Diana's warning. What the world called paranoia was now cold, hard science. The prophecy didn't just come true, it arrived with enough force to derail the entire monarchy. When she finally broke her silence to a single confidant, it wasn't just emotion, it was a confession of systemic failure. Her words cut deep. I swore I would protect her, and I failed. This isn't just grief, it's an admission that protocols and loyalty were powerless to save the truth. Anne didn't crack under media pressure. She cracked under the moral weight of realizing that her own silence was the wall blocking justice all along. The delay wasn't caution, it was a fatal error. By keeping the data locked, she let the machine crush the truth. Anne's tears aren't just grief, they represent the weight of her own inaction. But beneath the regret lies a terrifying realization. Her words, "The crown will never recover," aren't emotional hyperbole. They are a cold, hard diagnosis. When DNA disproves the bloodline, the throne loses its anchor. A lie this deep creates a permanent security flaw, one that can never be patched. For decades, the royal machine suppressed these shadows with ritual and protocol, but the genetic variable has ripped the veil away. We are done with whispers. This is the brutal collision of history and hard science. Genetic data does more than expose secrets. It reconstructs the truth. For the powerful, this isn't a media crisis. It is the demolition of the old order. The inquiry into loyalty and science ends here. Marble walls can no longer block the genetic code. A new chapter of history is being written right now in a language that is more objective and colder than ever before. Here is the final question. In a world where science strips secrets bare, can we handle a truth that shatters our reality? Or do we need myths to survive? If you held this report, would you choose disclosure to change the world or suppression to keep the peace? The data is now in the light. A seismic genetic misalignment has been found in the chain of succession. The map of power is about to be redrawn. When power is built on unbroken blood, a single deviation brings the whole structure down. If the genes don't match, the titles are void. This isn't just a legal issue, it is a crisis of institutional authenticity. Inheritance laws, royal decrees, and public trust are all suddenly suspect, and the deeper analysis reveals the terrifying truth. This was not a random accident. Diana didn't act on impulse, she acted on intelligence. Her security was compromised, her calls intercepted. To survive, she built a truth bunker outside the system, a final defense against a history she knew would be rewritten. But her trust had limits. Even Anne, the chosen guardian, was only given half the key. The name of the root variable remains in shadow. Only the warning of its destructive potential for the House of Windsor has endured through time. As these genetic fragments began to erupt into public discourse, this was no longer merely a media scandal. It was a direct assault on the structure of succession itself. Within the corridors of power, chaos spread as strategic advisors confronted a problem with no easy solution. If a single link in the direct line of succession is called into question regarding legitimacy, the entire legal framework that has governed the system thus far enters a state of temporary invalidation. This does not affect only the individuals directly involved. It raises a profound question about the future of the entire institution. Will the system choose purification to preserve the integrity of historical data, or will it attempt to shroud the issue beneath a new layer of diplomatic fog? As foundations once thought immovable begin to tremble under the pressure of empirical truth, the monarchy faces an existential crisis. This is not merely the story of an individual, it is the fracture of a belief system that has endured for centuries. If a single link in the chain of succession is proven to have a genetic misalignment, the entire legal structure and inheritance rules enter a state of invalidation. Silence from the firm is no longer a prudent strategy. It is becoming a catalyst for speculation about systematic deception. As parliamentary corridors begin to whisper about constitutional repercussions, public trust fractures between empathy and sharp scrutiny. While Anne sinks into a collapse of systemic certainty, another figure has emerged from the shadows with a radically different approach. Queen Camilla, in an emergency meeting behind closed doors, did not choose denial or grief. Instead, she displayed a state of strategic resistance. From her perspective, the genetic data was not a truth to be honored, but an information weapon sent from the past. Her remark about the recklessness of the deceased revealed an uncompromising confrontation between two modes of thought. On one side, Anne, with her anguish over an abandoned truth. On the other, Camilla, determined to protect the existing structure at any cost. The tension between the two most powerful figures within the palace erupted into a genuine battle of methodology. One side represented disillusionment and guilt, the other embodied a calculated damage control strategy. Camilla demanded a tight-lipped response, deploying legal instruments and media pressure to smother the leak. The marble walls now enclosed not only ritual, but a battlefield of legal threats and narrative manipulation. The system was attempting to heal itself by isolating the information pathogen, but can a genetic fracture truly be patched over with administrative paperwork? We have witnessed the moment when science, emotion, and power collide head-on. The final secret encoded in blood has not merely altered a lineage, it is raising a generational question about the very survival of institutions founded on heredity. Behind declarations about preserving stability, a strategy of system repositioning is being quietly deployed. The objective is not simply to contain a scandal, but to carry out a permanent data purification aimed at links deemed incompatible with the officially sanctioned bloodline. A leak from the highest advisory levels revealed a pragmatism bordering on cruelty. It is time to stop sustaining hypotheses that are not real. This was not merely a personal remark, it was a signal of an effort to rewrite royal history. According to internal analyses, the public relations apparatus received a top-secret directive recast the genetic data as a product of imagination or part of recycled conspiracy narratives in order to preserve the coherence of the royal storyline. Yet this structure encountered an immovable force: the steadfast resolve of Princess Anne. In a moment described as the breaking point of internal diplomacy, she delivered a sharp declaration. This is not a narrative to be managed. This is the truth. Anne's departure from the meeting, punctuated by the slam of a closing door, marked the end of compromise protocols. For the guardian of tradition, the line between protecting the crown and betraying the truth had officially been crossed. At that moment, the system ceased to be a unified whole and fractured into factions with completely opposing value systems. As internal conflicts reached their peak, the palace's self-defense mechanism completely failed under external pressure. Whispers in the shadows rapidly transformed into blazing headlines across global media. This was the scenario. The firm feared most the truth was no longer within their control. As genetic maps were dissected by data analysts and the press alike, a wall of protection built over centuries collapsed in a matter of hours. Headlines about the Windsor bloodline and the DNA variable sent shockwaves across every digital platform. Now the story is no longer guided by royal statements, but by the relentless scrutiny of a global public. The question of bloodline legitimacy is no longer an internal matter. It has become an open investigation for all humanity. Every expert, every biographer, and every observer is constructing their own interpretation from the fragments of leaked data. The palace's silence is no longer a display of authority, it is a sign of paralysis in the face of an undeniable reality. We are witnessing a rare historical moment when genetic secrets become powerful enough to pierce the most fortified layers of a monarchy. This conflict is not merely between individuals, but between the value of truth and the duty to preserve the institution. Now we invite you to exercise your own analytical judgment. Can the crown survive in an era of absolute transparency, or are we witnessing the unraveling of a long-standing myth? Leave your perspective below, and don't forget to subscribe to follow the next developments in this explosive investigation. When the walls of silence were breached, the outside world applied immense pressure. Questions about the coherence of the succession system and bloodline variables were no longer confined to closed rooms. Media outlets began running algorithmic deep dives into the past, turning historical ghosts into direct weapons against present-day credibility. Amid this data storm, Princess Anne unexpectedly became the focal point of a generational debate. One side views her as a guardian of truth, while the other sees her as a link that allowed a system error to persist for far too long. In an era where subtlety has been replaced by the speed of dissemination, Anne has become the focal point of a structure in fracture. The true detonation of this chain of events originated from an unreleased root data source, a leaked portion of Diana's private diary. These were not merely pages of writing, they constituted a truth matrix recorded during her final months. References to a bloodline secret provided the public with the final pieces needed to complete the timeline and understand the motivations behind the unfolding events. When these data points were finally linked together, the palace's conventional diplomatic protocols became useless. Internal pressure reached an alarming level as figures within the system began to panic in search of an exit. Under advisors' pressure to issue an information patch, a denial statement, Anne made a shocking choice to end the cover-up. Her assertion, "There will be no more data distortion," transformed the monarchy's long-standing silence into a devastating blow to its very structure. At this point, the illusion of a fully unified system completely shattered. Constitutional experts were summoned daily to address variables threatening the survival of the crown. Inside, there was chaos born of contradictory decisions. Outside, an uncompromising demand for transparency. Anne stood at the eye of the storm where every pressure and every old promise collided at full force. Yet this was still not the end. In a move that overturned every rule of royal governance, Princess Anne took a step that no strategist had anticipated. She appeared before the cameras not as a symbol of power shielded by ritual, but as an individual confronting the truth. It was a shift from royal protocol to responsibility to truth, a final act of facing a reality that no marble wall could conceal any longer. The moment Anne stepped into view will be remembered as a fracture point in traditional history. There were no blaring trumpets, no ceremonial escort of courtiers, only a solitary figure fully shedding the mantle of the steadfast temple guardian. In her hands was not a censored administrative document, but a relic of truth, a crumpled letter from Diana, one that had haunted the system like a ghost for more than 2 decades. As the cameras captured the image, Anne began to speak. Her voice was not that of an institution, but of a human being tormented by prolonged silence. She did not begin with justification. She began by confronting the variables head-on. With a painful steadiness, Anne confirmed what the system had long sought to conceal. The genetic report was an objective reality. She admitted that fragments of truth had been entrusted to her by Diana in her final days, but that at the time she chose to prioritize structural stability over data transparency. Her confession carried the weight of a belated awakening. "I mistakenly believed that burying a variable would protect the integrity of the entire architecture." But truth has no expiration date. It merely waits for the moment to reclaim its right to exist. In that instant, millions of watching hearts felt the shattering of a royal illusion, giving way to a stark, unadorned reality. The climax of Anne's address came when she broke every convention of lineage to reach the core of humanity itself. Looking straight into the camera, she delivered a direct message to the central figure of the storm, offering a new definition, one that drew a clear and deliberate line between a genetic map and an emotional legacy. She affirmed blood may define a line of succession, but empathy and love are what define a family. This act was not merely a gesture of consolation, it was a restructuring of values at the very heart of a system historically built solely on bloodline. Its impact was immediate, sending shockwaves across the globe, not through outrage, but through an unprecedented depth of empathy. That moment resonated far beyond the boundaries of an ordinary speech, becoming a seismic shift in how legacy itself was understood. For the first time in the modern era, the public was no longer observing a symbolic entity. They were confronting an act of existential authenticity. Anne chose to break through traditional barriers in favor of a universal truth. The wave of response was not merely support, but a redefinition of admiration itself. From the most exacting critics to the general public, all recognized this as the most powerful moment of humanization in the long history of monarchy. Anne had shifted the narrative, entirely transforming a data crisis, a DNA scandal, into a revolution of sincerity. Before leaving the podium, Anne left behind a principle that will be quoted for centuries to come, a manifesto on the balance between power and truth. Truth may generate tremors that shake the crown, but it is the very adhesive that strengthens the foundation of a nation. The silence that followed was not emptiness, but the sound of a system standing at a strategic breaking point, a state in which old rules no longer apply, and every path forward demands an unavoidable reckoning. A family was changed forever, not by external pressure, but by internal courage. Yet as Anne stepped down, a new chapter opened with the most critical variable of all, King Charles III. Facing an institution in flux and mounting questions about the coherence of the bloodline, the monarch now confronts a decision that will define his reign. Will he choose to continue the conservative protocols of the firm, or will he follow the path of transparency his sister has opened? This is not merely a personal choice. It is a question of whether a 1,000-year-old legacy can survive in the information age. The greatest question now no longer lies in genetic numbers, but in the response of the apex of power. Will the monarch choose to deny objective reality or accept the historical reckoning that Diana set in motion decades ago? Behind stone walls, the silence surrounding King Charles has become a terrifying pause. The cancellation of public engagements and the postponement of ceremonies are not merely personal retreats. They signal a paralysis of the entire representative machinery. Behind closed doors, a governance tragedy is unfolding. Charles is being torn between two opposing forces, the pragmatic faction led by Queen Camilla and a circle of seasoned advisors urging an immediate campaign of legal damage control to erect a barrier between the crown and the consequences of the DNA variable. And the legacy faction echoes from the past and the sincerity of Anne's confession, where the ghost of Diana is no longer merely a memory, but has become a shaping coefficient for the future of the reign. Charles is not merely confronting a personal crisis. He stands at the threshold of what can be called the entropy of the institution, a state in which old rules no longer possess the strength to hold a fracturing structure together. A shift in power has begun to surface through secret meetings with Prince William. Held late at night and entirely removed from advisory staff, these discussions carry the character of future reconstruction. According to system-level analyses, these are no longer ordinary father-son conversations. These were dramatic, contradictory, and at times explosive debates over how to maintain the crown when its very foundation has shifted. They are attempting to design a new protocol for an era in which truth can no longer be permanently sealed away. King Charles now stands before an entirely new map of reality. Every step he takes from here will determine whether the monarchy adapts in order to survive or collapses under the weight of secrets brought into the open. In your view, in the confrontation between institutional stability and the transparency of truth, which side will ultimately prevail? This content is purely for reference based on unverified hypotheses and public speculation. We approach it from an objective, analytical perspective. Join me in decoding this mysterious picture together. Press 1 if you want to continue digging into unexplored and undisclosed angles. Press 0 if you believe in the absolute self-protective mechanisms of the royal institution. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking developments in the series Truth Behind the Veil. Thank you for accompanying us. See you at the next variable. At 7:48 this morning, a moment marked the end of an era and the beginning of an irreversible turning point. Prince William, heir to the throne, broke the silence with a decisive move. The dynasty closed, all hope of reconciliation shattered. Why did William act so forcefully? Was it to protect his family or a declaration of the dynasty's survival? We will explore these history-changing decisions right here at Windsor. Comment 1 if you support 0 if you find it unappealing. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on the upcoming power secrets. Let's begin. Instantly, the world held its breath. For the first time in decades, major broadcasters paused their programming to air what veteran experts described as unprecedented. No more vague diplomatic rhetoric, no more appeasement delays. This message was personal and utterly decisive from William. From London to Los Angeles, from bustling newsrooms to millions of individual screens, a new reality had been established. In the United States, where royal narratives are always viewed through a deeply ingrained cultural lens, this declaration was seen as a complete redefinition of the structure of the monarchy. This was no longer a dialogue, but an affirmation of the institution's future. What surprised observers most was the absence of phrases like "at this time" or "in the present circumstances." In the dictionary of the monarchy this morning, only the concept of permanence remained. For those who had witnessed the crises of the past, William's steadfastness offered a thought-provoking clarity. Throughout the years, William had chosen to step back, allowing the institution to speak through carefully crafted statements. But today he personally signed the final chapter of a long-running controversy. This act was not merely an official announcement. It was a declaration by a future monarch of unity and the protection of the institution's core values. What prompted a man known for his meticulous planning like William to take this extraordinary step? The answer lies not in a single event, but in the accumulation of subtle shifts throughout the autumn of 2024. When diplomacy is no longer sufficient to maintain balance, and when spiritual values are put to the test beyond their limits, decisiveness becomes the only tool to protect stability. This is not an impulsive reaction, but the result of a profound process of reflection on responsibility and legacy. The door has been locked, and the key has been handed over to history. It is the culmination of a silent observation process when the limits of tolerance have finally been reached. Throughout the latter part of the year, an unusual pattern began to emerge, making Catherine unable to remain silent any longer. Whenever a significant initiative is launched or a community mission is launched, opposing streams of information immediately emerge. These articles don't come from transparent sources, but are hidden behind vague concepts like insider voices or anonymous observers. However, the timing of their release paints a picture of calculated intervention rather than random news. In a private conversation, Catherine pointed out the existence of an invisible hand pulling the strings behind these upheavals. This was no longer a natural flow of media, but a strategic campaign to obscure her devoted efforts. Witnessing his wife's devotion being undermined by deliberate manipulation, a new resolve formed within William. Meanwhile, King Charles was also facing his own challenges. He realized that the monarchy's valuable resources were being disproportionately wasted dealing with misinformation from distant sources. Legal experts and security teams had to work continuously to assess the risks from inflammatory content in the digital space. Meanwhile, the monarch himself was prioritizing his recovery, which demanded tranquility rather than relentless pressure. He felt caught between family affection and the responsibility of protecting the stability of the institution. Hope for harmony was real, but systemic paralysis was unacceptable. The real turning point came from a secret national security meeting. Authorities identified an organized pattern of activity targeting Catherine. These information campaigns transcended the boundaries of ordinary criticism to become a real threat to the credibility of the monarchy in the digital age. William received the report in a highly secure setting. Each page revealed a harsh truth about the origins of these psychological attacks. A significant proportion of the negative activities were confirmed to be linked to extremist groups from the opposition, turning William's suspicions into an alarming reality. The challenge extended beyond national borders. Delicate but serious questions began to emerge from major international